Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. My name is Gabriel Cox and I equip first-time supervisors with necessary leadership tools. Before we get started, I would like to invite you to head on over to my website and subscribe for a free resource. The ultimate guide to identifying what type of leader you are in 5 easy steps. While you are there, you can check out my Goat Locker, which is a place where you can get free tools to help you develop as a supervisor. Hey, what's going on everyone? Today I want to talk a little bit about managing your manager. Now, I do a lot of work with folks who are learning to become new supervisors, and in a lot of cases, some of these supervisors have challenges with their boss, with their direct supervisor. And this can create a lot of frustration. And so that's why I want to talk about this today. I've gotten this question a few times on how to manage your manager. So we're going to talk about this a little bit today. So what's going on here? What's this situation all about? So sometimes many supervisors don't feel that they should have to manage up. They feel, hey, look, I have a boss. Why doesn't he do his or her job? What's so wrong with that? I do my job. Why can't they do their job? Another thing that's happening is that a lot of supervisors that they might be retaliated upon if they were to actually speak up and do something about it or say something to their supervisor. And this is a very natural response because you're new at your job or whatever's going on. And so you might feel that if I speak up now, well, what are they going to think about me in the future? So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Another thing that's happening is that, it's important to keep in mind that your ability to lead others is incredibly important. But think about how your boss's inability to lead you or direct you or be a boss to you could have on your future with the company. And remember that 70% of employees quit their boss, not their job. And that's a pretty big number. And that goes true for you too. Just because you're a supervisor now doesn't mean that you're not looking for someone, that mentor or someone to look to to help you learn your role. And then, another thing that's happening is that just because you're not the big boss or you're not the top boss in your company, or that you have just another supervisor ahead of you, it doesn't mean that you can't manage up. So don't assume that just because they are in their role that they can't use your help as a follower. So it's important to understand when managing up is appropriate. So here are a few ideas on what I think that are appropriate times that your boss might need to be led or might need some help from you as his or her direct report. So brand new bosses are often, brand new bosses new in their role oftentimes can get caught up in their new role, much like you might be going through right now. But maybe they were previously an executive and now they've moved into a CEO role or something like that. And that's really top of the chain. But kind of think about that. If your boss is a brand new boss as well, or a brand new leader as well, they're new in their role. And so maybe your help can help them or your guidance can help them out. The other thing is that if your manager doesn't see you face to face, you work virtually or whatever happens in that situation, maybe you don't see each other every day or every week or however often. But in this case, it's often important for you to say, hey, I got boots on the ground. I know what's going on here. And so you're not face to face, so let's have a conversation. And this is another time when it's going to be appropriate. The other time that it's going to be appropriate is when you have an insecure boss. Again, the imposter syndrome creeps up for them as well. So if your boss appears to be a little insecure, managing up can be helpful. The other type of manager, or the other time that this might be important, is if you have the all-knowing or indecisive supervisor. This type of supervisor might think that it's their way or the highway, and your guidance, your leadership is going to help them to see that their way is not the only way. The other type of manager is one that gives conflicting messages. If you have a supervisor who tells you one thing and immediately changes their mind or tells you something that's confusing to you, this is going to be a time for you to practice your ability to communicate through these, constructive criticism or anything else that we've talked about. But certainly, if they're giving you confusing or conflicting messages, it's important for you to step in and say something. Another type of manager that might be appropriate is someone who's long-winded, someone who talks and talks and talks and talks, and requires that little bump, that little, hey, let's rein it back in, or something like that. And again, these are simple, quick conversations, simple things that you will do. These tips I'm going to give you. So the other type is the hands-off boss, somebody who has nothing to do with you and just expects you to do your job with little guidance. And remember that these bosses are great because obviously we don't want to meet the micromanager, which is the next type of boss that I'm going to talk about. But the hands-off boss is a little bit different. Maybe they give you a little bit too much free rein, and you kind of need that expertise, or you want that expertise or guidance on a new project or whatever's happening. And so your ability to communicate with them and to manage them is going to help them. And I mentioned a second ago, finally, the micromanager. We all have had one. We've all had this micromanager boss where they're constantly, watching what you're doing, checking up on you, and doing all this kind of stuff. Your ability to show them that, hey, I can do this job and you can build trust within me is going to help. But it's only done with you managing them. So why do we care? Why are we talking about this? Why is this important? Just because you have challenges, just because you have a challenging boss, does not mean you have to suck it up. It doesn't mean you have to put up with it. It doesn't mean you have to go to work every day and say, man, my boss doesn't know what he or she is doing. They micromanage me. Whatever. It's making me crazy. Just because you have this type of supervisor doesn't mean that you have to suck it up. The next thing is thinking about the fact that your team is expecting you to stick up for them. They're expecting you to come to them or to speak up on their behalf in every situation. They go to you for everything, and they expect you to bring those concerns up so that it doesn't create a culture of a lack of trust. Finally, another thing I like to talk about is times when you're not going to agree with your boss. It's important to understand that it's okay to disagree with them in a respectful way. Otherwise, again, you're just going to have to, you might just stay quiet or not say anything, which ultimately will lead you to saying, I can't handle this job anymore or whatever. So what are you going to do about it? How do you manage up? So I'm going to give you a few tips here on things that I learned as I grew up, or as I became the leader that I was and am, and, some things that you can do about this situation. So one, you want to embrace the mission. That's number one. Most important, you have to understand what your job is, why you were hired, and why you were promoted. And all of that comes with embracing the mission. The next thing you want to establish with your manager is you want to have a positive relationship. When you think about it, you spend more time with your coworkers and supervisors than anyone else, as far as your waking days. If you're working 8 to 10, sometimes 12, 16 hours, you might be spending more time with your supervisor than anyone else in your family. So it's important to establish that positive relationship, whatever that looks like for you. You want to understand your boss's goals. What drives them? If you don't know what their goals are, it might be time to find out. So really dig in. Next, you want to anticipate their needs. What type of, I can't even think of an example right now. What do they want? And thinking about that before they even need it is important. I got to a place with my staff, after a while they finally understood, hey, this is the way he likes this presented. And it wasn't because I was mean about it or anything like that. They just knew that's the way I like certain things in certain organized ways. And so they anticipated my needs because they understood my goals. And so that's part of it is understanding your supervisor's goals is going to help you anticipate their needs. The next step is everybody's favorite, and I call it the blind side. There's nothing more irritating than being blindsided. Not having any idea that something is going to happen, and then all of a sudden you go into a meeting with they go into a meeting with their boss, and they don't know something has happened. Don't ever let your supervisor be blindsided. Probably the most important, next to the blind side, is to do your job and do it well. This is a point of pride. You go to work for a reason, and that reason could be, well, I'm just going to provide for my family. But job satisfaction is huge, especially nowadays. People want to be satisfied in their place of work because we spend so much time there. And so when you do your job and you do it well, it's a point of pride. And honestly, it's something that your supervisor can brag about to their coworkers. So just think of it from that perspective. The other thing I like to offer is that when you're sitting down and maybe you have that micromanager and you're having all these conversations, you're using all these tools, let them know how their support is going to help achieve the mission or achieve the goal. So if they give you the freedom or the autonomy to be able, or they empower you to do whatever it is you want to do, that help them understand what their role is in all of your work and how they can best support you. Another tip I like to offer is let them know how they can best use your talents. Maybe you have a job that they're not using your talents, or your talents are not being best used, or not to maximum that they can. So keep in mind that you can let them know, hey, I am really good at this area, and it's best to use my talent because of X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. But tell them how they can best use your talents. And obviously, incredibly important, we work in a busy environment. Most companies are running at a very high rate of speed. And so it's very important to honor your boss's time, honor your supervisor's time. Nobody likes drop-in bombs. You come in, you throw a grenade in the room, and you run out. Nobody likes that. You want to ensure that everything that you want to talk about is being put out on the table. And the best way to do that is to honor your boss's time. Find out what time works best for them to meet or to have FaceTime or whatever it is. Put it on the calendar if you have to, but make sure you're honoring their time. And that will allow you to best make sure that you are getting everything you want to talk about and that you're not dropping bombs in their office and then walking out. So as we start to wrap this up, I'd like to ask a few questions. Have you ever experienced managing up? And what I mean by that is, have you ever had to manage up, or have you ever been managed by one of your direct reports? Has anybody ever come up to you and said, hey, I think you should do this, or anything I just talked about? How did you respond to that? Did you respond defensively? Did you take it for action? Were you humble about it? Whatever it was. How did you respond? Next question is that in your current situation, is managing up realistic for you to do? Do you feel that you have built a relationship and honored their time and done all these things that we've talked about so that you can lead your leader? And finally, how important is your approach when you are managing up? So using these steps, how important is it for you to use those steps or to communicate effectively with your boss? If you don't do it, are you hindered in any way? Are you frustrated by your supervisor? So I'm going to close this out by offering a few episodes for reference. I've been doing this video series for a while now. I've done, I think, 13 videos. And so I'm going to give you a couple videos that are directly related to the content in this podcast. So the first video I want to offer is episode 2, how to give constructive criticism. The next episode is episode 5, speaking up, and how to speak up appropriately, when is appropriate to speak up, and why it's so important. And the final episode that I'd like to offer, again, as reference to this podcast, is episode 10, followership, and the importance of followership. So all of these episodes are directly related to the content in this podcast, and they're all available on YouTube and on my website. So if you'd like to watch those, there's a lot of great content in there. I'd like to thank you all for listening. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you are a supervisor who is currently looking for leadership development, log on to my website and click the Work With Me link and fill out the application to qualify. If you know someone who may benefit from this podcast, please share it with them.